Mais um dia, mais uma live. Começando aí live de número 82, né? Depois de 2 semanas fora. Foi 2 semanas? Deixa eu ver aqui. Foi 2 semaninhas fora. Tava viajando. Eu falei que ia fazer live durante a viagem. Eu fiz 2 dias na Twitch. Fiz 2 dias aqui na... Eu não lembro meu user. É esse aqui. Ele não tá mostrando aqui porque acho que deu 2 semanas e aí ele apaga. Eu fiz 2 dias pelo celular. E aí depois eu fiquei sem acesso à internet. Tava na praia e tal, e aí não consegui fazer. E depois quando eu consegui também, tipo, ia ficar muito complicado pra mim fazer, e porque eu tava com mais gente na casa, e eu não queria atrapalhar o pessoal, ia ter que pedir internet também, porque minha internet zicou. Enfim, foi um problemão. Mas estamos de volta aí, sem mais delongas. Vamos dar uma sequência no nosso estudo. A gente parou em SQL. Vamos dar uma olhada aqui no nosso Java Roadmap. Aqui a gente já viu boa parte disso aqui, né? Já viu bastante. Isso aqui a gente terminou. A última coisa que a gente viu foi Functional Programming. Eu lembro disso. A gente tava começando a ver Concurrency. A gente deu uma olhadinha bem por cima dessas coisas aqui, que é um assunto bem complexo. E aí eu decidi dar sequência no SQL para poder fazer algum projeto utilizando o Spring Boot, né? Fazer um CRUD. Então é isso que a gente vai fazer. Eu tô meio desorganizado, eu quero me organizar melhor, principalmente esse ano. Comecei a estudar mais agora que eu não tô trabalhando mais, estudar bem mais. Dar essa focada aí, né? Então, a gente parou aqui no Insert Into e eu pensei em dar uma olhadinha em cursos de SQL. Tem o Bro Code, mas eu acho que desse Coding with Mosh talvez seja melhor, né? Mesma duração. Tem do Free Code Camp, mas eu acho que o do Code with Mosh é bem bom. Eu vou ver esse daqui. Gosto da didática dele, acho bem profissional. Aqui ele tá falando pra instalar as coisas, né? Eu devia instalar pra poder coisar. E aí eu vou fazer isso aqui pra dar uma revisada. Eu sei que eu já vi, tipo, os assuntos bem básicos mesmo. Mas como tem 2 semanas que eu não encosto em nada, nem em linha de programação. Então... Então eu vou dar uma revisada aqui, vou assistir desde o começo. Vou instalar os softwares aqui, até porque eu também não tenho no meu PC. E é isso aí. Talvez o mic esteja meio desconfigurado, talvez as coisas estejam meio fora de ordem, mas ao longo, conforme o andar da carruagem, as melancias se ajeita, né? Então eu tô meio perdido também em jeito de falar e tal, em dar sequência, mas isso aí é costume, né? Acho que amanhã já tô melhor.
Hi, my name is Mosh Hamadani, and I'm super excited to be your instructor. In this 3-hour course, you're going to learn everything you need to get started with SQL or SQL. First, I'm going to give you a 3-minute introduction to SQL. Then we're going to install the necessary tools and write our first SQL query. This course is ideal for anyone who wants to learn SQL from scratch, but also anyone with some basic knowledge who wants to fill in the missing gaps. By the end of this course, you'll be able to retrieve, insert, update, and delete data in databases. We'll talk about tables, relationships, different types of joins, subqueries, regular expressions, and much more. We'll talk about tables, relationships, different types of joins, subqueries, regular expressions.
Aqui eu já não sei tipo o que é um join, tá ligado? Não sei se ele é uma entrada de dado. Não sei o que é um subquery. E nem que é regular expression tem ideia que
and
seja.
much more. These are the essential concepts that every software developer or data scientist must know. This SQL course is packed with tons of exercises that help you both learn and remember the SQL syntax. Also, there is a table of content below this video, so you can quickly jump to specific tutorials. Now let's jump in and get started. Let's start the course with a quick overview of databases, what they are, and how we use them. A database is a collection of data stored in a format that can easily be accessed. In order to manage our databases, we use a software application called Database Management System, or DBMS. We connect to a DBMS and give it instructions for querying or modifying data. The DBMS will execute our instructions and send results back. Now, we have several database management systems out there, and these are classified into two categories: relational and non-relational, also called NoSQL. In relational databases, we store data in tables that are linked to each other using relationships. That's why we call these databases relational databases. Each table stores data about a specific type of object, like customer, product, order, and so on. SQL or SQL is the language that we use to work with these relational database management systems. It looks like this. We use SQL to query or modify our data. In this course, we're going to learn everything about this powerful language. Now, there are many different relational database management systems out there. Some of the most popular ones are MySQL, SQL Server by Microsoft, and Oracle. But of course, there are plenty more. Each database management system has a different flavor of SQL, but all these implementations are very similar and are based on the standard SQL specification. So most of the SQL code that you will learn in this course will work with any database management system. In this course, we'll be using MySQL, which is the most popular open source database in the world. All right, now back to this diagram. What about non-relational databases? In non-relational databases, we don't have tables or relationships. These databases are very different from relational databases, but that's a topic for an entirely different course. What you need to know is that non-relational database management systems don't understand SQL. They have their own query language. So we use SQL to work with relational database management systems. Now, before we jump in and install MySQL, let me clarify something quickly. As you talk to different people, you'll hear two different pronunciations of SQL: SQL or SQL. What is the correct way? Well, it depends on who you ask. And of course, everybody thinks their way of pronouncing this word is the right way. But here's a little history about this language. SQL was originally developed at IBM in the 70s, and back then it was initially called SQL, short for Structured English Query Language. But they changed the acronym to SQL because SQL was the trademark of an airplane company. So to this date, there's been an argument about what is the right way to pronounce this language. Generally speaking, people in non-English speaking countries call it SQL. I'm used to calling it SQL because it's shorter and sweeter than SQL. But if you prefer to call it SQL, that's totally fine with me. I'm not going to get mad at you. So that's the history behind this language. But what about MySQL as a software product? Developers of this product prefer to call it MySQL rather than MySQL, but they don't mind if we call it MySQL. In this course, I'll be teaching you SQL with MySQL. Hey guys, Mosh here. I just wanted to let you know that you really don't have to memorize anything in this course because I've created a complete cheat sheet with summary notes for you. You can find it below this video in the description box. So I have done my best to create the best possible, most comprehensive SQL course for you, and I would really appreciate it if you support my hard work by liking and sharing this video. Thank you so much. Now, let's continue. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install MySQL on your computer. Now here I'm using a Mac, so first I will show you how to install MySQL on a Mac computer, and then I'll show you how to install it on Windows. So if you're a Windows user, feel free to skip this tutorial. Now, open up your browser and head over to mysql.com. Then, go to the downloads page. Download. Otherwise, you have to create an account and log in.
Tá, ele só vai ensinar como que
enter a
baixa, né?
password. Let me show you. So on the first page, for the setup type, we're going to use the
Caralho, mas o setup dele de instalação já tem bastante opção, né? Deixa eu ver aqui o MySQL Installer. Cara, aqui eu vou tirar... Dev MySQL. Esse é o Web Community. Instalar esse. Tá, eu vou tirar a tela aqui. Mas aqui ainda tá baixando. Vou botar um lo-fi aqui enquanto isso. Aqui. aqui eu posso fechar aqui.
Login, which is unnecessary for her to enter a password on it. Alright, we're going to use this setup wizard to install MySQL on our computer. This is very easy. All you have to do is to click next. But there are a couple of places where you need to enter a password. Let me show you. So on the first page, for the setup type, we're going to use the developer default setup. Go to the next page.
O meu não tem developer setup. Por que o meu não tem esse?
Like, it's very easy. All you have to
Install all products needed for musical development purpose. Por que o meu não tem esse? Pô, já começou difícil, velho. Pô, a única opção que preciso o meu não tem, velho. Eu vou pesquisar no ChatGPT. Será que eu consigo baixar o outro dele igual nesse? Deixa eu ver qual que ele tá aqui, né?
Alright, for Windows. This is the recommended. Scroll down. So here you should see something like this, MySQL installer for Windows. This is the recommended method for installing MySQL on Windows. So click on this. Alright, on the next page, scroll down and download the first installer here.
Ah, peraí, ele baixou o web?
So here you should see something like this, MySQL installer for Windows. This is the recommended method for installing MySQL on Windows. So click on this. Alright, on the next page, scroll down and
Ele baixou o web.
download the first installer here.
Ele tá 8.15. Será que se eu baixar esse ele faz diferença? Deixa eu ver aqui, viu? Ah, porque ele tá rodando outro. Também não tem essa opção. Deixa eu ver esse outro. Vou tentar baixar o anterior a esse. Tá, esse aqui é bem antigo, mano. Eu acho que é... não, nenhum aparece. Acho que eu vou colocar o full, mano, se pá. Pega o full mesmo e fé. E o pior coisa. Ixi, tá dando erro aqui, velho. Não sei se é erro, mas tá aparecendo exclamação vermelha, né? Exclamação vermelha geralmente não é bom sinal. Ah, não é, deu feio de aqui. Dois deu certo. Show de Deus. Que foi, gatinha? Que foi? Acho que eu vou ter que refazer isso aqui, né? Porque ele instalou direito. Eu vou dar um cancel e vou fazer de novo. Vamos ver se agora vai. Se não for, acho que eu vou só dar sequência na aula mesmo. Então, enfim, vamos dar sequência.
On the next page, scroll down and click on no thanks, just start my download. Otherwise, you have to create an account and log in, which is unnecessary for following this course. So let's go with this. Just to click next, the developer default setup. go to the next page. Now here we're getting a little warning because this installation wizard wants to install the connector for Python 3.7. But I don't have Python on this machine, so that's why I'm getting this warning. Now on your machine, you might or you might not get this error. It doesn't really matter. Just click next and one more time. So here are the products that are going to get installed. The first one is MySQL Server. The second one is MySQL Workbench. This is the graphical tool that we use to connect to our database server and manage our databases. You're going to see that soon. So click on execute. Now this is going to take about 5 to 10 minutes, so I'm going to pause the recording.
Nossa, demora
All right, all the
bastante.
products are installed. Beautiful. Let's go to the next page. And again, here on the group replication page, also click on next. On the next page, which is about networking, leave all the default settings. So let's go to the next page. Now we should set a password for the root or the admin user. So click on next, and in this box, type a password for the admin user. All right, and then let's go to the next page. Once again, leave all the default settings and click on next and execute one more time. All right, and now let's finish the installation. Once again, we have to click on next and then finish. One more time. There's so many steps. Now here's the page where you need to enter the admin password. So the page is called connect to server. You can see the username is root, which represents the admin user. So in this box, enter the password that you set earlier, then click on check. Okay, connection was successful, beautiful. Let's go to the next page and click on execute and finally finish. There you go, we have one more step. Next. Now finally, after all these steps, the installation is complete. Now this is going to start MySQL Workbench, which is the graphical tool we use to manage our databases and run SQL queries. So click on finish. So now we have a command prompt window where we can type instructions to talk to our MySQL server. We don't really need this, so close it. And here's MySQL Workbench. Now the first time you open this page, by default you should see a connection here. If you don't see it, click on this plus icon. On this page, give this connection a name. Let's say local instance. Now leave all the settings to their default value. But here for the password, click on Store in Vault. And in this box, type the password that you set for the admin user. So I'm going to put that here. Okay. Now click on Test Connection. All right, we successfully connected to the MySQL server on this computer. All right. Then click on OK. Now we click on this connection to connect to our database server. All right. So here's the interface that you'll be using throughout this course. On the left side, we have the navigator panel. In the middle, we have the query editor, which we can resize. This is where we're going to write our SQL queries. And on the right side, we have SQL additions. So we're done with the installation of MySQL on our computer. Next, I'm going to show you how to create the databases for this course. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the databases for this course. So here I've got MySQL Workbench open. Let me quickly give you an overview of this interface because the first time you open it, it might appear a little bit intimidating, but actually it's not that difficult. So here on the top, we've got this toolbar with these buttons for creating a new tab for writing SQL code, as well as opening a SQL file. And next to that, we've got a bunch of buttons for creating a database, creating new tables, and so on. On the left side, we've got the navigator panel with two tabs, administration and schemas. We use the administration tab to do administrative work, such as starting or stopping our server, importing or exporting data, and so on. The schemas tab shows the databases that we have in the current database server. So currently we only have one database, that is sys, and this is the database that MySQL uses internally to do its work. Now in the middle, we've got this query editor window. This is where we write our SQL code. So we'll be spending most of our time in this course in this window. And on the right side, we've got another panel with two tabs, context help and snippets. The chances are this interface might look slightly different on Windows, but what I'm showing you here is almost identical with what we have on Windows. So don't get hung up if it looks slightly different on your machine. It doesn't really matter. Now up here, we've got these buttons for showing or hiding these panels. So to clean this interface, I'm going to hide this panel on the right side, as well as the panel on the bottom. That is better. Now to create the databases for this course, download the zip file I've attached below this video. When you extract the zip file, you're going to see a bunch of SQL files like this. So the main one that you'll be using is just the ones we have on Windows. So don't get hung up if it looks slightly different on your machine. It doesn't really matter. Now up here, we've got these buttons for showing or hiding these panels. So to clean this interface, I'm going to hide this panel on the right side, as well as the panel on the bottom. That is better. Now to create the databases for this course, download the zip file I've attached below this video. When you extract the zip file, you're going to see a bunch of SQL files like this. So the main one that you'll be using in this tutorial is called create-databases.sql. So this file contains all the SQL code to create all the databases that we need in this course. Now we also have individual files for creating individual databases. I just added these files in case you need to recreate one of these databases in the future. But for now, don't worry about them. Now, back to MySQL Workbench. Let's open the main SQL file. That is create databases. So this is an example of SQL code. Now this may look complex at the beginning, but trust me, as you go through the course, you're going to understand exactly how everything works here. You're going to be able to write SQL code like this. So you want to execute this to create all the databases for this course. To do that, we click on this icon, this yellow thunder icon that we have on this toolbar here. This will execute either the selection or the entire code if there's nothing selected. For example, if I select this line here and click on this icon, this will execute only this line. In this case, we want to execute the entire code, so we shouldn't select anything. And now let's execute this. Beautiful. So here down the bottom, we have this panel called the output window that shows all the operations performed in our database server. So we can check to see if all the operations completed successfully or something went wrong. As you can see, we've got these green ticks next to each operation. Beautiful. So I'm going to close this panel. That's better. Now on the left side in the schemas tab, currently we don't see the new databases. So we'll have to refresh this view. Beautiful. So we've got all these databases that are prefixed with SQL or SQL. I decided to prefix them with SQL so we know that these are the databases for this course. They don't accidentally clash with another database with the same name on your database server. Now, at the time of recording this video, there are only 4 databases here, but as we go through the course, I'm going to update the script for creating the databases. So when you watch this course, chances are you're going to see more databases here. Don't worry about the difference. Now, as an example, let's explore one of these databases. And by the way, we don't need this tab anymore, so let's close it. That's better. Let's expand the SQL Store database. Now, in every database, we have these objects. We have tables. This is where we store our data. We have views, which are kind of like virtual tables, so we can combine data from multiple tables and put them in a view. And this is especially powerful for creating reports. You're going to learn about them in the future. We also have stored procedures and functions, and these are little programs that we store inside of our database for querying data. For example, we can have a stored procedure for getting all the customers in a given city. So we call that procedure and say, hey, give me all the customers in San Francisco. And this will return all the customers in San Francisco. Okay. Now let's expand the tables. So here are the tables in this database. We have customers, we have orders, products, shippers, and so on. Now select this customers table. Whenever you hover your mouse over this item, you should see these 3 icons on the right side. Click on the rightmost icon that looks like a table with a thunder. With this, we can see all the data in this table. So this is our customers table. In this table, we have these columns like customer ID, which we use to uniquely identify customers. We also have first name, last name, birth date, phone, address, and so on. So these are the columns in this table, and every row is called a record. So every row represents one customer, and these are the pieces of information we know about each customer. Now let's look at another table. Let's open the orders table. In this table, we have these columns like order ID, customer ID, order date, status, and so on. What is this customer ID here? We use this column to identify who has placed each order. Now, what is interesting here is that we're referring to these customers using their customer ID, which uniquely identifies them. In other words, if John Smith has placed an order, we don't store John Smith here. We only store John's customer ID. Why is that? Here's the reason. It is possible that John Smith might have placed multiple orders in our system. Now, every time John places an order, we need to look up his address and phone to ship his order. Now, it is possible that some of this information might change in the future. John might move to a new place or change his phone number. He might even change his name. If we repeat all that information next to each order, then we'll have to come back and make changes in multiple places. In contrast, with this design, we only store the ID of John here. So anytime we want to change any information about John, instead of changing that here, we go back to our customers table. So let's look at the customer with ID 6. That is actually called Elka. So here are all the information about Elka. This is her phone number, this is her address, and by the way, this is all dummy data that I created using a tool. So if any information about Elka changes in the future, this is the only place that we need to modify. So this is how these databases work. We refer to these databases as relational databases. That basically means in this kind of databases, we have multiple tables that are related to each other using a relationship. So internally, there is a relationship between the customers table and the orders table. So the customer ID column in the customers table is related or linked or associated with the customer ID column in the orders table. Here's the orders table, and here we have the customer ID column. So this was a brief introduction to relational databases. You learned about databases, tables, columns, rows, and relationships. In the next section, I'm going to show you how to retrieve data from a single table in this database. But before going any further, as an exercise, I want you to explore the invoicing database. Look at all the tables, look at all the data, to get an idea of the kind of data we have in this database. We're going to use this database a lot in the future. So we'll spend a couple of minutes to explore this database. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to retrieve data from a single table. Now look at the navigator panel. Currently, none of our databases is displayed in bold. That means none of these databases is selected for querying. So the first step to write a query to get data from a database is to select a database. The query that we'll write will be executed against that database. In this demo, we're going to use the SQL store database. So we type out use SQL _store. Now use is a keyword in the SQL language, and that's the reason it's displayed in blue. Now, SQL is not a case-sensitive language, and that means we can use uppercase or lowercase characters. It doesn't really matter, but as a best practice, we should capitalize the SQL keywords and use lowercase characters for anything else. So now let's go ahead and execute this query. All right, look, the SQL store database is now displayed in bold. Now in MySQL Workbench, you can also select a database by double-clicking that. So now I double-clicked SQL invoicing, and it's the current database. Now if we run this query again, the SQL Store database becomes selected. All right, now let's write our first query to retrieve all the customers in this database. So after the use statement, we're going to use the select statement. Here's the basic syntax or basic structure of the select statement. We type out select. In front of that, we specify the columns that we want to retrieve. For example, we can retrieve the customer ID column as well as the first name column, or we can retrieve all columns using an asterisk. Now, after that, we use the from clause, and this is where we specify the table that we want to query. In this case, the customers table. So this is the simplest query to select all the customers in a given table. Now, whenever you have multiple SQL statements, you need to terminate each statement using a semicolon. So look, we have a red underline here that indicates an error. If you hover your mouse here, you can see this tooltip saying select is not valid at this position because we didn't terminate the first statement with a semicolon. Okay, now let's execute this query one more time. Once again, we can click on this button here, or we can use a shortcut. So look at the query menu on the top. The first item is execute. Now here's the shortcut for this command. On Mac, it's Shift, Command, and Enter. On Windows, it's going to be different. Honestly, I'm not sure. So whatever it is, use that. So I'm going to press Shift, Command, and Enter. And here are all the customers in this table. So this select statement has two clauses, the select clause and the from clause. But there are other clauses that we can use to filter and sort data. For example, we can use the where clause to filter the result and get the customer with ID 1. So we can write an expression like this, where customer underline ID equals 1. Now when we execute this query, we'll only get the customer with ID 1. So this is the where clause. We can also sort the data. So after where, we use the order by clause. And here we specify the columns that we want to sort the result on. Let's say we want to sort these customers by their first name. So we type out first underline name. That is the name of one of the columns in this table, right? Now, if we execute this query, this order by doesn't really have any impact because we only get one record in the result. So let me temporarily take out the where clause. To do that, we can put two hyphens in front of this line. Now this line is treated as a comment, which means the SQL engine is not going to execute this. Okay, so let's execute this query one more time. Now all the customers that we get
Interessante,
are
né? O
sorted
comentário é feito com
based
hífen.
on their first name. So that's the basic idea, that as a comment, which means the SQL engine is not going to execute this. Okay, so let's execute this query one more time. Now all the customers that we get are sorted based on their first name. So that's the basic idea. Now over the next few tutorials, you're going to learn more about each of these clauses in detail. But what you need to take away in this tutorial is that these three clauses, from, where, and order by, are optional. As you can see, in this example, I'm not using the where clause. We can also comment out the order by clause. We can also comment out the from clause. So instead of selecting all the columns in a given table, we can select some values like 1 and 2. Now, if we execute this query one more time, in the result, we get something like this. Two columns called 1 and 2, and in these columns, we have these values. So all these clauses are optional, but in the real world, we quite often use all of them. Now, what you need to understand here is that the order of these clauses matters. So we always have select first, then we have from, then where, and finally order by. We cannot change the order of these clauses. Otherwise, we get a syntax error, which basically means the syntax or the grammar or the structure of our SQL statement is incorrect. So it can't be executed. And one last thing before we finish this tutorial. In this example, you can see I've listed all these clauses on a new line. Now, technically, you don't have to do this because line breaks, white spaces, and tabs are ignored when executing SQL statements. So we could come back here and put from in front of select, so select star from customers all in one line, and that's perfectly fine for simple queries. But as your queries get more complex, it's better to put each clause on a new line. So that's all for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll explore the select clause in detail. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the select clause in detail. So, since our current database is SQL Store, to clean things up, I'm going to remove the first statement. We don't really need it now. Also, I'm going to delete.
Cara, eu tô dormindo, acordado, queria estudar mais, mas caí de sono. Amanhã eu quero estudar bem mais, estudar muito mesmo. Correr atrás dessas 2 semaninhas aí. Vou sair fora. Hoje foi só aquecimento, só pra voltar. Já estamos de volta aí. Muito obrigado aí todo mundo que colou. Obrigado a quem assiste off live. Tamo junto. Amanhã